Hey, yeah, so as the year winds down and more of us go into a kind of hibernation mode, um, hmm, it's been interesting lately how fluidly things tend to move, if they can be said to move at all. It's like I'm present, absorbed, the I doesn't exist, and then maybe it does, especially if I need to merge into traffic or something. It's kind of important which one's my car. Um, or even I get caught in thoughts for a while and there's some suffering. And then it's like, oh, I got caught in thoughts for a while. And then it just drops like it was never there. It doesn't matter. And I can spend more and more time absorbed into absorbed, dissolved, with less of that feeling of like, oh crap, who's manning the fort? Who's going to make sure I don't do something wrong or weird? Um, More and more, it just doesn't matter. Even if I do, like, it's going to be gone as soon as it's over, right? Somebody might remember it, but that's their problem. Like, okay, I might get kicked out of an establishment. I don't know. I'm just making up scenarios while I watch a squirrel. Um, yeah, point is, and when I spend more time absorbed, there are sensations that previously would have seemed like a problem, like suffering, that no longer do so much or at all. It's like a bird flying in the sky. It's not a problem. It's like it's just another form of aliveness. I have no idea what it is. And it seems funny now that I ever could or still can be caught in linking those sensations to a thought or belief and turning it into suffering. I wrote a poem called An Ode to My Shadow, which was just kind of welcoming all these scenarios, all these sensations, all these even the so-called worst days, giving them a voice, giving them a voice that doesn't try to pretty them up or explain them away or wish them away. It's just like, nope, sometimes it is, well, yeah, we don't like to admit that so-called ugliness exists. So we try to push it away. And that's where all the problems are created. If you just welcome so-called ugliness, it's like welcoming fear. It's just here. It's just, I mean, you can put the label ugly on it, that we've been conditioned to put the label ugly on it. But somehow putting it into poetry without trying to pretty it up made it somehow less of an enemy, less of a problem. Anyway, I might read the poem at the end, but what I wanted to talk about today was how now, when I'm in these relatively non-dual states and the so-called difficult feelings emerge and are welcomed, that used to kind of be my cue to get out of the non-dual state because, like, oh wait, what's this? What's going on? What's wrong? You know, um, but there's enough safety in the system now that, and I've gone over and over my, like trauma history so many times that it's a pretty worn out track. It's pretty dusty old kind of, yeah, been there, done that, gone around and around on that enough times. It's kind of, I'm much less likely to want to run around in that circle again. But yeah, these so-called difficult feelings keep, emerging, and sometimes I get caught in them. That does still happen. And Angelo talked about how, like, when you make friends enough with what is, then you're no longer like trying to tell or trying to get away from, or like whatever emerges. If it's difficult, then the tendency before is like, oh, when's this going to go away? When am I going to be done with this? He said at some point you no longer want to leave it. You no longer want to get out of it. You're no longer waiting uh, until it finishes, until it's over. It's just like sipping tea or something, like, a nice hot strong tea. It can be a bit bracing in a way, but not a problem. And there's no sense of when am I going to get out of this, because there's no getting out of anything. Get out of what? What does that mean? And there's a sense of, when I was younger, the idea of like, well, take whatever you can get, accept whatever's dished out. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Um, and I think that sort of attitude or resistance to that attitude carried over to, the non-dual path and everything. And it's kind of finally flipped to where it's like I'm not imposed upon with the stuff that sucks. It's more just like, oh, what's here? What's coming next? Oh, it's for free. It is, it's just gonna keep appearing, arising. And then, like, if I want to put the identity costume back on and have fun with that, I can do that whenever I want to. Um, so yeah, it's like I don't have a choice as far as I get to pick my universe, I get to pick my laws of physics, I get to pick my, you know, um, where I was born. I don't get to pick how many unicorns I get to own. Um, I don't get to pick what color the squirrels are. I don't get to pick what feeling's going to arise in my gut. I don't even necessarily get to pick how I relate to any of that because it seems like something beyond the programming that reaches down, reaches through, and gives these breadcrumbs, these intimations that there's something more than scratching itches and polishing an ego. There must be more than this provincial life. Maybe I was just brainwashed by Disney. And Rumi and Rilke and Lao Tzu and all the other, and Henry Thoreau. But why would any of that resonate deep in my bones, completely orthogonal to the culture I was raised in? It's a mystery. Anyway, I wrote to a friend. I said when people ask me these days what I'm up to, aside from parenting and housekeeping, which of course gets zero respect in this culture, um, I tend to kind of make something up. I mean, there are things I'm interested in or working on, but most of what I'm doing is like lying fallow as I absorb and alchemize what feels like something higher than any truth the mind can wrap itself around. Like something completely mysterious that I can't say a word about. There's really no room in our culture for talking about that, so I mostly don't. Um, I come up with something more acceptable because only ambition and doing are respected. Being, silently alchemizing, surrendering to a mystery that won't pay any bills. There's no space to talk about that. I mean, you can find spaces, uh, but it's rare. It's fairly rare. Yeah. Um, and the kind of there can be shame around that, around being so countercultural, uh, and it plays into my fears of being lazy and spoiled and immature and all that kind of stuff from when I was a kid. So that can lead to distraction, so-called wasting time. Um, which can drive the shame deeper. And I'm finally starting to kind of get out of that, but it it can happen. And I try to breathe and tell myself it's okay. It's not easy. It's not going to be all smooth and perfect. I'm a jagged little being surrounded by more juicy distractions than have ever existed since our species began. Um, yeah, and then often, the mind is like, well, okay, but will this eventually be productive or helpful in some way? And I'm less and less sure that's the correct answer. It's the question we're conditioned to ask. And maybe there's no question to ask at all. Just this. Just this. And the mind says, okay, but what is just this? Why? What's it for? And more and more, I just have to leave that hanging. I don't have an answer. It hangs there in the air. And life goes on. Whatever it is. Okay, I'll read the poem real quick because I think it helps me anyway. It helped me to kind of, yeah, welcome the so-called ugly stuff that doesn't seem so ugly anymore. It just seems like part of it. Ode to my shadow. I want to write an ugly poem to pay homage to the fact that this life isn't always pretty or neat or dreamy or sweet. I want to write an ugly poem about the ache in the gut that feels like death would be a kindness to free me from this heat. I want to write an ugly poem about the kind of lost that isn't a cute adventure, but more a slog through warm, runny shit. I want to write an ugly poem about the kind of doubt that leaves you a dull pile of hatred that looks for any way out. I want to write an ugly poem where meanness wins the day and nausea mixes with a cursed hope and asks, why can't it just be some way? I want to write an ugly poem about grief that could fill all the seas, searing pain that could smother all living things, make whole galaxies fall to their knees. I want to write an ugly poem where I have the wild delusion that I can make a universe so much better and not torture everyone with these stupid illusions. I want to write an ugly poem about days when I feel so misshapen and scarred. It doesn't look like anything in any book or poem. It just sucks so fucking hard. I want to write an ugly poem about loneliness so bone deep. I'm sure there is no meeting place anywhere for this crappy, cretinous creep. I want to write an ugly poem about terror that gnaws at the solar plexus. It feels worse than emptiness, worse than failure, a hot sucking black hole the size of Texas. I want to write an ugly poem and not make it pretty at the end. I want to give voice to the times when I feel like the universe is not my friend. Don't worry, I noticed my ugly poem mangles meters and rhyme schemes and shit. I told you it wasn't pretty or neat. Some days and some poems are like that.